Welcome to Standard Deviation.
Hello, Ciara.
Hey, Kevin. How's it going?
Oh, it's going. How you doing?
Hanging in there.
Yeah, same. It is Wednesday, June 17th, 2020. And things are great. Everything's normal.
Yeah.
It's exactly like it was last year on this date.
Nothing.
Not. So we got the pandemic, got a weird economic situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's bad. The stock market's doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Probably says a lot about the nature of the stock market.
Yeah.
Some protests going on.
Mm-hmm.
Some police departments being disbanded.
Yes.
We got, yesterday I read that China killed 20 Indian soldiers in a conflict in the Himalayas, which apparently is a big deal. Saw that South Korea says that North Korea blew up an office during negotiations, which strikes me as a weird way to handle negotiations.
Well, North Korea.
Yeah. Donald Trump is the president. I guess, that's worth saying.
Yeah, that's still a thing.
Yeah. Thankfully, it looks like I'm not letting myself get too optimistic, but it looks like he's not doing so well in terms of popularity. I mean, I read today that there's a group of Republican operatives got together to help other Republicans endorse Joe Biden, who's a Democrat. He's the Democratic candidate. So that's cool. There's more and more Republicans going on the record against Trump, which is great. Kind of disgusting that it's taken him this long, but, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you seem more optimistic than I am that he won't get reelected.
Yeah. Well, what is yours based on? Just intuition?
Well, just with all the, rioting going on and the civil unrest, I think, history has shown us that when that happens, people want law and order, which is what Trump keeps tweeting. So I think a lot of people will want a Republican candidate for that reason. I'm not saying it's logical, but I think...
Yeah, I see your point. And it's funny that you say that he keeps tweeting that, because he literally just tweets the words law and order
in all caps.
And people are like, yeah, that's my guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Just like he waves the Bible, like, see, it's something you like. Mm-hmm. Vote for me.
I mean, if it is true, and a lot of people have made this claim that a big reason why he was elected in the first place was because of culture wars going too far. Well,
yeah. I mean, the thing is, a lot of it seems like a lot of voters kind of vote emotionally.
Yeah.
And one thing that's good on that front this time around is that the world is a lot worse off than it was when he was elected. Mm-hmm. And that's something that even idiots can see. They can put it together. Not all of them, but I think a lot of people can just look around the world and say, well, shit, I gotta say, I was expecting things to be better, and they're worse on all fronts. Mm-hmm. So why would I vote for this guy again?
Yeah. Well, hopefully. I mean, hopefully. But at the same time, they could also be looking at what's going on and blame the Democrats.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's the deep state conspiracy.
So, Chris Delia is trending on Twitter right now.
Yeah, you told me.
Comedian Chris Delia, which we've seen him live before. Mm-hmm. I've seen him live actually a couple of times.
Funny guy.
Yeah, pretty funny. He is being accused of sexual misconduct. And it's basically based on a bunch of screenshots, messages, not just screenshots, but also some women just openly coming out on their Twitter accounts. Lots and lots of them saying that he behaved in a predatory way, tried to get them to hang out in his hotel room, have sex with them, that sort of thing.
How dare he?
And, yeah.
It's almost like he has a penis.
And from what I can tell, this is just what I've seen, and things happen so quickly. Like, by the time we release this, maybe, it'll come out that he clearly, raped an 8-year-old or something. But from what I've seen so far, most of the allegations were from women who said they were like 19, 20 years old. So that's not illegal. There are a few that are underage, some 17, 16-year-olds, I think, at the youngest. And of those, again, this is just what I've seen so far, The screenshots show a conversation where he's flirting, and then he asks how old they are, and they say like, I'm 16 or I'm 17, and that is where the conversation ends. There is one in particular where the girl said she was 17, and then he hits her up a year later.
So
I mean, I think it's fair to say that he's kind of a creep and predatory behavior. I think that's somewhat fair to say.
How?
Well, I mean, it is tricky because it's like, as a society, we just decided like 18,
Well, yeah, but the other thing is that if he doesn't know how old they are, then he asks, and then they tell him they're under 18, and then he fucks off. Like,
yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying, it is a little creepy and predatory that there's clearly a pattern of behavior where he's targeting this rather young age range.
That's the thing, though, is maybe you could find just as many texts from women in their 20s and 30s. Maybe he's just a horn dog, and it's just the young ones are coming out, and that's controversial.
Yeah, it's true. It's not super clear. It looks at least somewhat creepy, I'm not trying to necessarily defend him, but I thought it was interesting because Neal Brennan, another comedian, came out, like, this all happened very quickly yesterday. There were like a couple screenshots that came out, and they're anonymous screenshots, and Neal Brennan very quickly made a tweet that said he detested sexual predators, and if any proof comes out that Delia knowingly try to have sex with someone underage, that he would give $1,000 to RAIN, which is a rape and incest charity. He deleted that tweet very quickly as all these other kind of screenshots started coming out very quickly. And then he just put a tweet that says, I believe in due process. And people were commenting like, okay, dude, And then today, he came out with a thread that I thought was actually really good. He said, look, people are mad at me because I said I believe in due process. I still believe in due process. I think that's important. I was, when I made that tweet about donating and how I hated sexual predators, there were only a couple screenshots that came out, and my instinct was to, defend my friend. But now that more info has come out, I was wrong, and I'm making this donation. But I just want to say, like, I do believe it is also wrong to, like, automatically believing one group of people is just as bad as disbelieving a whole group of people. And he made the point, like, we used to just automatically believe in white people when they said a black person, did something to them, and that was wrong. And in this case, it's wrong too. But he said, but whatever, like, more evidence seems to be coming out, and I didn't know he acted like this, and if I did, I wouldn't have been his friend, and, here's some, but I'll stand by what I said, and he made a donation. Then he deleted that whole thread and said, I deleted my thread because people pointed out that I was making this about me, so I deleted it.
Okay. Wow.
And that was it.
Well, I mean, I think it sounds like, I haven't seen any of these tweets, but it sounds like it was about him because people were criticizing him, so he was, addressing that.
Yeah. Which I think is fine. Like, yeah. I liked that thread because I think it showed integrity, and he donated to a good cause. He donated like $5,000 to RAIN, and
so is the concern that like by having this thread, like, he's taking attention away from these, I guess, victims, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it basically said, like, someone was saying, or a lot of people were saying that he was making it about him.
Yeah, are there really people out there who are, like, concerned about victims, and then they're like, oh shit, somebody else tweeted something, now I'm distracted, he should delete that so that I can only see tweets about rape?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of childish mentality is that?
It's not like a zero-sum game.
Right.
Like, and I thought he made some good points, and I think it is likely that Delia is kind of a creep, but I think Neal Brennan's instinct was right in that, hey, let's not, like, when he first made the tweet about, kind of somewhat defending him, it was just a couple screenshots, and it brings up the topic of just mob rule, and that's a problem right now, especially with social media. I just saw a couple days ago there was a video of a woman, one of the Karen videos, going around. She was at a coffee shop, I think, in line. And the video starts out of her kind of talking in a hostile manner to a woman about the fact that she wasn't wearing a mask. And then she goes up and just coughs in the woman's face and then like storms off. And as she's storming off, she notices she's being filmed. And there's kind of a somewhat funny split second where she's like, oh shit, And she behaved in a gross way. I'm not defending what she did. But when this was posted, very quickly, Twitter does what Twitter does and started doxing her and started going after her job. And I have a real problem with that, man. I think that is evil. I think that is gross. And I said something. I tweeted. I was like, look, I think she behaved in a gross way, but like going after her, doxing her, trying to get her fired, that's evil. And someone tried to argue with me that it was actually good. And there's so many things I wanted to say, but it was like, I don't want to get into this on Twitter. But
it seems to me that like if somebody does something that is illegal, then they should be prosecuted, charged, whatever, and that's that. Yeah, that's why we have the system. If we didn't have a judicial system, then I could see more of a case for, I guess mob rule, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But given that we do have things in place, like I would imagine what she did, I don't know law, but I don't know. Is that illegal?
People were arguing that it was maybe it could be considered assault. I mean, with the pandemic and coughing on someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's worth looking into.
Yeah.
But like doxing someone is almost never appropriate. I mean, I look at doxing like using force, where sometimes it's the only option or it's the best option to protect people, but just when it's just harassment, that I don't see any benefit in that.
Yeah,
and the thing is, like, also that it's worth pointing out the implications are more concerning than even an individual case, because it's wrong to dox people if there's other means of making amends or whatever. But the other thing is the precedent it sets, because people are very short-sighted about things, and they neglect to consider the fact that the mob isn't always right, and this could happen to them just as easily whether they do something wrong or not.
Right.
And that's the whole problem with mob rule, is that due process matters. People are supposed to be put through a system of carefully balanced measures that ensure or attempt to ensure justice.
Yeah.
And this isn't that.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic, especially in cases of sexual misconduct, because rapists and predators usually get away with it, because it does come down to a he said, she said. And I understand.
And because a lot of victims don't report.
And because, yes, exactly. Because it is traumatizing to go through that process, and I don't blame victims for not wanting to. And so it's flawed in that way, that a lot of predators do get away with stuff. And so I'm sympathetic to, like, if someone like Delia behaved in such a way that was like shitty, and you went through that, like that was your personal, experience and story, like you should have the right to talk about it,
Sure.
But then, it just gets tricky when it's so easy to demonize someone that might be innocent, because at the end of the day, these were screenshots. It should be looked into. I'm of the belief that they're probably true. But with social media and technology, like moving as quickly, it's so easy to fake things.
Yeah. And also, like, is he even being accused of anything that's illegal?
Hard to say. It depends on the age of consent laws and whether, like, some of these instances where he was flirting with 17-year-olds, like, how far did they really go? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of these tweets, so I don't know. Just from what you've said, though, it doesn't actually sound like he did anything illegal, at least from what you've said.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's hard to say if he did anything wrong. I mean, it doesn't sound like he was persistent when it was unwelcome. It doesn't sound like he refused to be rejected or harassed anyone.
Mm-hmm.
He was hitting on some young women.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And I mean, I don't necessarily endorse all behavior just because it's not illegal. There's plenty of illegal or legal behavior that I would say, is not something to be engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I mean, it seems like of all the things to worry about right now or ever,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how this rates.
Yeah.
It's curious.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about it, really. Because people should be allowed to, I don't know, I'm repeating myself. People should be allowed to, share their experiences. It's just disturbing how easy it is for the mob to just get swept up and ruin people's lives.
Yeah. I feel like things are especially volatile right now because of the pandemic, the economic impacts, people being shut in and isolated and stressed and having zero leadership,
mm-hmm.
and or at least on a national level.
Well, I saw another thing coming out in this same vein. There's a woman named Sky Jackson, I think. She's like a Disney Channel star. I personally haven't heard of her until just now. And she is exposing racists on her Twitter. And basically what she's doing is allowing anyone and everyone to tweet at her and tell her about some racist that she can expose and dox. And a lot of these people are teenagers. And Teen Vogue just wrote an article celebrating what she's doing.
Interesting.
And
are people providing evidence or just here's a racist name? Expose them?
I did see that. I saw exactly that when I went to her tweet. Someone was commenting, just showing screenshots of someone, their Snapchat ID, but with no receipts of them saying anything.
Well, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say this as a side note. It is often pointed out that Twitter is not the real world. And at least in terms of things like proportions and scale, So seeing this kind of thing, particularly when it's viral, it's definitely bad and it's meaningful. But hopefully it's not reflective of general attitudes or competence or intelligence.
I don't think so. I think it's a loud minority.
Yeah. It's crazy the kinds of things that I see that get really, really popular on Twitter that are just, they shouldn't be. I saw a tweet about a week ago that was, somebody tweeted that there was a guy, a young black man, I think he was a teenager in high school, who was found in a high school gym, dead with organs missing, rolled up in a wrestling mat, and it was ruled a suicide. And this had, at the time, it had I think 700,000 likes and about 250,000 retweets. And I was thinking, based on that description, it seems unlikely that that's true. So I looked into it, and it's not true. It's not at all true. Some of it's true. He was found dead in a gym inside a rolled-up wrestling mat. He was not missing organs. He was given an autopsy, and organs were removed during the autopsy. When he was transferred to the funeral home, they questioned why his organs were removed, and it was explained. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't found with his organs removed, and they said it was a suicide. That would be ridiculous. Mm-hmm. They also didn't say it was a suicide. They said it was an accident, that he had positional and compressive asphyxia, which is also what killed George Floyd. Apparently, kids at this school would sometimes put their shoes in rolled up gym mats that were sitting up long ways. They would toss them in and then dig them out. And this apparently the theory is he got stuck trying to dig out his shoes and suffocated, which seems plausible to me. Mm-hmm. But even if he was murdered, the fact that this tweet was just completely wrong about the two most important things, that it was ruled a suicide and that he was missing organs when he was discovered, and it was this popular, 250,000 people retweeting it. What's going on,
Yeah.
Well, how the critical thinking ability of people is just not there. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure some of this is bots, because I know Russia, for example, using a lot of bots on Twitter specifically to disrupt America, to confuse people, to spread disinformation, and on a meta level to decrease people's faith in information. Mm-hmm. And not to say that this particular case was a bunch of bots, but it could have been.
Yeah.
They'll latch on to any controversy they can. The more false, the better. just to, fuck up people's information flow
Yeah.
and perspective. And people are just clamoring for it. They're in line, ready to be manipulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a friend of mine posted a article which she clearly didn't read at all. I was like, she said it was an article about I forget the guy's name, but there's a man who was found hung on a tree recently, and people they ruled it a suicide, and people are like, I don't think this was a suicide, it may be lynching. I don't actually know that case in particular very well, so I'm not trying to comment on that. But my friend posted another article saying, oh, here's another black man that was found lynched, and they're saying it's a suicide. And people are all like angry emojiing it and like suicide my ass. And I opened the article and it says that it wasn't a black man. It was a Hispanic Caucasian man. And the family said that he was suicidal.
Yeah.
And it just speaks to like how little people are looking into anything, really.
Yeah. Yeah, like how did she must have seen somebody else post it with the wrong summary, and then she just repeated it without reading it or something.
Right. And this is really dangerous because it confuses things. Like there really are problems, and we should address those problems. But stuff like this is just confusing it.
Yeah.
It's like people do kill themselves. That is a thing.
Right. Yeah, and just the idea that it was a black man. Like I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure it was an honest mistake, but like people. Slow down a little bit.
Right.
Let's chill for a second.
Yeah.
And I think, I've been guilty of some of that before myself. I'm sure I've posted false information, certainly. And I'm focusing more on that, especially in the last few years since I've become aware of things like Russia deliberately trying to spread misinformation, and just the fact that, it's easy to get stuff wrong or to believe a source you shouldn't believe, or to believe a good source who later retracts what they thought was true, and then you don't know they retracted it. And, that kind of thing happens. But there should be a certain baseline of responsibility that people feel to get things right. But a lot of times what I see instead is if you point out something that somebody posted as false, they'll just point out that, well, the broader topic that it's about is so important that it doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's the kind of shit that drives me crazy. Because, like, how are you even going to know what the broader topic is? Like, what if the broader topic is 50% bullshit, you know? And everybody's just so concerned about the broader topic, making that same defense, that they're just obscuring the landscape. And this isn't just a matter of nitpicking. This is a matter of creating change in the world. And to create change, you have to know what's happening. You have to know what to change, and in what ways to change it, and whether or not it is changing. If you're just spouting bullshit rhetoric the whole time, it's nothing's going to get done that way. It's going to be a snail's pace instead of lightning fast as it should be.
Yeah, it's not useful.
No.
I saw my friend posted about, like, was comparing how many deaths, shootings by cops, how many people have been killed by cops compared to other countries. And they were comparing the U.S. to Norway and Finland, which I just pointed out. So it was comparing the deaths, and then it was comparing how much training cops get in various countries. So it was making the point that, like, there was only 9 deaths in Finland and, 1,000 last year in America. And
there's like 2 guns in Finland.
Right, that's my point. Like, and it said, like, in Finland, it takes 3 years to be a cop, and here, I don't know, 6 months or whatever crazy amount. And I pointed out, I was like, okay, you have to consider population size.
Right.
We have over 300 million here. Finland has about 5 million. And they have no guns, and we do. And that is a big thing that people aren't really talking about, is like, we have more guns than people here. Like, what do you think how do you think that will affect interactions between police and citizens? Of course there's going to be more deaths.
Yeah, like, I mean, imagine if we took away guns from police. They would quit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, knowing that they could be confronted with a gun any second of any day they're on the job, they have to be armed. They have to be armed lethally because our population is armed lethally.
Right.
And our population consists in part of criminals who want to kill them. So,
Yeah. And the one good point I think that Meme pointed out was, just the
amount of training.
The amount of training.
Yeah.
Which then makes me wonder, like, people are talking about defunding the police. How is that going to help with better and longer training?
Yeah. It's a good point. and defunding the police is something I don't remember if we've talked about this. When I first saw that, I thought it meant like completely defunding the police. But I think what people are usually referring to is cutting budgets in order to accordingly cut the scope of police. So they point out cases where the police are usually involved where they shouldn't be, like drug overdose. They're called for drug overdoses. When I overdosed on drugs as a teenager, I was talking to 2 armed cops in my hospital room before I even spoke to a doctor. That's the kind of thing that I agree police should not be involved in. Like I was in there being threatened with arrest, and they were going to arrest my friends, and they wanted information, and it was like a whole thing. And I'm just like, I literally just died and woke up, and like, I don't know what's going on. Like, maybe chill, cops. Don't you have some bad guys to arrest? You know?
Right.
So that's a case, where you don't necessarily need cops involved. And there's plenty of other cases. I'd say virtually all drug arrests, sex work arrests, that should be outside the scope of policing, I think. So to the extent that defunding means cutting that kind of stuff, I'm all for it. But you bring up another that point, which is that it's not the cash that's the problem. It's the scope of police work that's the problem. And if you were to maintain the existing budget or even just cut it less, but stop having cops do all this stuff that's harmful, not only not helpful, but actually harmful, then you could use that additional funding for things like extra training, external reviews by third parties, auditing, monitoring, and oversight. There's lots of stuff you could do with the funds. But just cutting the budgets without explicitly cutting the scope as the first priority before budgets, that does seem like it would just lead to worse training, and it'd be really more dangerous for everybody. Yeah.
And with all this, like, ACAB, all cops are bastards, does like rhetoric, I don't like, who would want to be a cop right now? It's not a very appealing job. And that kind of concerns me, because I do want there to be cops, and I want them to be good. Yeah. And I can't imagine who would want to be a cop right now. Yeah. Yeah. You either have to be very brave and principled and stoic, or very tribal and defensive and aggressive. Yeah. Or crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough position to be in. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost setting a precedent to have only psychopaths as cops. Yeah. Or, as you said, maybe someone who's just very, very, very principled. And I'm sure a lot of them, I mean, hopefully most of them, but at least a lot of them are I'm sure, struggling emotionally, trying to do the right thing, trying to maintain their stance, their position in society, the benefits they provide to society. But doing that while this negative image and negative propaganda is piling up, I mean, like, these are the people that they're trying to protect and help, ostensibly, the good ones. Yeah. And even if a lot of those people don't even want their help or existence, then it's got to be hard to stay in that position. Yeah, I told you about this off the podcast, but I saw a video that was so heartbreaking of but I have a lot of questions about the video as well. But what it showed was a young black girl, maybe like 8 or 9, and a policewoman, and apparently the Hi, Kimiko. Yeah, Kimiko. Cat talk. The little girl saw the cop and was just triggered by it, started crying and throwing up her arms. And the policewoman, really felt for her and just slowly approached her, and with tears in her own eyes, just tried to talk to her and kind of got like crouched down to her level, even kind of looking up at her a little bit, and, just said, hey, I know things are really crazy right now. And I just want you to know we're not all bad. And I have a son about your age. And I don't know. I just saw it. I just thought it was so just heartbreaking and sad. And then I read the comments, and the comments are just saying, fuck this cop. Why the hell is she approaching this little girl? Like, she's obviously traumatizing her. Should have just left her alone. And it's just an example of they can't do anything right. Like, if it was a video of her crying and the cop just walking away, what do you think the comments would say? They'd be like, oh, that heartless bitch. Like, just doesn't even recognize her humanity, Yeah, it's just like when you saw cops protesting with protesters being accused of faking their support. Well, do you want them Like, what do you want
stop
from
the protesters? Do you want them to fight them? Do you want them to help them? Like, there's no right answer.
Yeah. And then on the other side, I saw people saying that this was the parent's fault and the parent was brainwashing this girl into being scared of cops. And that's not fair either, because we're all getting this information. We're all, you know, like, I don't think the parents know any better, you know?
Yeah, and this kid might have been old enough to be on Instagram or something and getting her information that way. It might not even be the parents.
Yeah. But my question also was like, who's videotaping this too?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, because all the people are saying like, what the fuck, that cop approaching her. It's like, well, if you're mad at the cop, you should be mad at who's ever taping this. And, you know, if she was so traumatized by the cop just talking to her, then she shouldn't have been filming it. She should have taken her daughter or his daughter and walked away.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it seems like based on this description, it seems like the cop did the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, making some effort to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, kids should not be afraid of all police officers.
Mm-hmm.
A certain amount of caution makes sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know. It seems obvious that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I thought so. But feels like a maze with no exits.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, because people are fundamentally not rational. And it's easy to forget that when there's not a maelstrom of public opinion just feeding off itself in a weird positive feedback loop and obscuring everything.
Yeah. And then you get something like Twitter, which is like the worst way to communicate these complex issues. And it just comes into it just turns into people shouting slogans at each other and, you know, ignoring the nuance of a situation.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'm really curious about all this from a sociological and psychological perspective is like, it seems so strange to me. Like when people act that way, I can't relate. And like, I feel like that might be a blind spot for me because I'm a person, you know, these are people. And granted, there's lots of people that can't relate, but I feel like there's some bit of information I should have that would make this more comprehensible to me. Like, why are so many people willing to just engage in this clearly irrational behavior and rhetoric, you know? And I mean, it's tribalism and fear and propaganda and all that, but how is it that people lack self-awareness to that degree? That's what I'm curious about. And I'd sound judgmental, and, you know, there is a certain amount of judgment, obviously, to the extent that I think they're wrong, but I don't mean to... I mean, it could happen to me, I think, in theory, and that's the part I'm struggling with, is like, how? Like, what is this? You know, what is this phenomenon? Is it maybe just people aren't exposed to enough counterpoints? Like, it's an echo chamber thing where they just don't even take a second out of the day to think maybe they're wrong? Or is it fear of being excluded from the group by not towing the party line?
I think it's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And feelings of righteousness and, fear of being ostracized, because I feel like it's so easy to be ostracized in this climate right now.
Yeah. It has been kind of forever, but especially the last few years, which is partly what led to this podcast that we do. Just that culture. But it's, especially right now, I think it seems a lot worse.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to talk about, because I think last couple episodes, we've talked a lot about just kind of the craziness of what we see going on right now. But we haven't really talked a whole lot about like what could change amongst the police force that would make it better. And you brought up two good things, such as the war on drugs and sex work. I think sex work and drugs should be decriminalized, and I think that would make a huge difference. I know, like, I don't know if it's still the case, but I think it was in the 80s or 90s that like the punishment for crack cocaine was worse than just regular cocaine, which created a
disproportionate impact on the black community.
Yes, thank you.
So this is one that I don't know enough about, and I try to stop myself from issuing caveats by instinct, you know. But this is one where I have to caveat that I have not done a ton of research. But it strikes me that Sam Harris pointed out when he talked about this that whether the policy was intended as a racist policy or not, the impact has been racially unfair.
Yeah.
And this is something that's often touted as a racist policy. And I disagree with that tentatively. And the reason is because a racist policy would say that if a black person and a white person are caught with the same drug, the black person should get a heavier sentence.
Mm-hmm.
That's a racist policy. Crack and cocaine are actually not the same drug.
Mm-hmm.
If they were, people wouldn't take the time and effort to make cocaine into crack cocaine. There's a reason they do that. And from what I understand, I don't know much about cocaine or crack cocaine, but I think crack is more potent by volume and is therefore cheaper. Mm-hmm. And that makes it potentially more dangerous by being more potent per volume. I don't know. But it's just not the same drug. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
They have two names because they're two things. Crack is made of cocaine, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So, having said that, though, yeah, the crack is more often consumed in black communities than white communities, probably because of economic disparities. And so, yeah, it's had a disproportionate impact.
Yeah.
But either way, decriminalizing drugs would solve it.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Not to mention taking away all the cash and power from cartels. I mean, God, what has the war on drugs done that's good?
Nothing.
I cannot think of anything. It's been just such a clusterfuck. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah, an addiction should be treated as a health problem, not a criminal problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's people in jail for drugs. That's insane. That's a crime. Mm-hmm. You got the cartels out there murdering people. I mean, that's bad. Mm-hmm. The wasted public funding, all the cops wasting their time on drug offenses. It's just insane. And then there's the impact on society. The lack of access to drugs, I think, probably does a lot to diminish what we could be as a people. Because essentially drugs are an avenue, a medium for exploring and augmenting your mind and yourself. And to the extent that we are disallowing that, we're disallowing growth. And certainly there's downsides to drugs. They're very dangerous. I can attest to that firsthand. But they're also very good in the right circumstances.
Yeah.
But since it's all under the shroud of darkness because it's illegal, it's really hard to take drugs in an informed, responsible, safe way. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. And when you talk about sex work, I think most people's concern with that is, sex trafficking. And I would argue that making sex work illegal makes sex trafficking worse because it creates a black market. And if we were to decriminalize it and not arrest women who are grown adults and making their own decisions, then it would be easier to find people that are exploiting others and trafficking them.
And there would be less demand for sex trafficking.
Yeah.
If it's just like drug trafficking. Why are drugs trafficked? Because they're illegal.
Right.
But I mean, who would go through the trouble of paying extra to a cartel that's murdering people to get their drugs in America if you can just go to your corner store and buy some weed, as we do here in Portland?
Yeah.
It's so wacky. It's almost like it's so obvious that it's hard for people to see that they're creating these nightmare situations by trying to preempt them. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. What do you think about no-knock warrants?
I don't know enough about them, first of all. I think in general, if there are cases where they're a good idea, which seems like there would be, they should be very carefully justified. Mm-hmm. Like if you're going somewhere where you have a good reason to think that if you knock and identify yourself as police, that it will escalate immediately. Like if you're knocking on the door of like a gun trafficker who's killed 30 people, maybe just go ahead and kick in the door. Mm-hmm. Even then, there's a risk of a mistake, like getting the wrong address or something.
Such the case as Breonna Taylor.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Having said that, I think if there are cases where they're going to do that, just busted in without knocking or identifying themselves, it should be very carefully vetted and justified. And I don't know what the system is now for doing that, but it could probably be better. Yeah. Like most police systems. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can see how it creates a lot of problems. I mean, if the cops just come in, then, anyone that lives in their house and, you know, has weapons to defend themselves, then obviously they're going to use those weapons if someone just comes in their house without knocking.
Yeah, I sleep with a gun next to me, and if somebody kicked in the door, I'd have that gun in my hand pointed at the door before I even thought about the possibility of police.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it puts police at risk to do that. It's obviously flawed in the case of, you know, Breonna Taylor, this innocent woman that just got shot in her bed. That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, in the case for those who don't know, I believe what happened is they were doing a no-knock warrant, went to the wrong house, kicked in the door. Her boyfriend had a gun and had no idea they were police because they didn't announce themselves, and he fired at them, and they fired back and killed her. Mm-hmm. And in that case, I mean, even if that was a justified no-knock warrant, just they were at the wrong house.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure there's something they could do about that too, maybe.
Yeah.
It is weird to imagine that if it's so important that they know they have to go in without announcing themselves, but they don't take the time to, like, I don't know, stake out the house, you know, like look at the people to see if they're the people that they're supposed to be arresting. I mean, was it just like they got the number mixed up, or maybe the person moved and somebody else moved in, like that kind of thing? It seems like there should be a lot more careful oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky to say if they should just get rid of that. I can certainly see the flaws, but, you know, in certain circumstances, as you mentioned, it does make sense. So I guess the question is, like, does it do a net good, even if there's these, you know, possibly extremely rare instances where they make a mistake like that? You know, if they get rid of it, will there be more innocent people lives died as a result? I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, there are some things that I think we shouldn't do away with, despite the fact that there will always be some error rate. Mm-hmm. Probably this is one of them, I think. But a contrast would be the death penalty, where sometimes innocent people are executed, and I don't think that there is enough of a benefit from the death penalty to justify that. Mm-hmm. With arresting people, I think there is enough benefit, probably, to justify some no-knock warrants, because there are some people who should be arrested. But I don't think there's anybody who should be executed, in the sense that executing them doesn't accomplish anything other than revenge for society. It is not a deterrent. It is more expensive than keeping them in prison, so it's not saving tax dollars on housing or anything. It's just all around a negative. Mm-hmm. Unless you're all about vengeance. Yeah. But that doesn't justify killing innocent people in the process.
Yeah, I've always said, like, on a real visceral emotional level, I'm for the death penalty, because I think some people are beyond help and deserve to die. But practically it doesn't work for the reasons you just mentioned. Yeah,
and my take is similar to that, which is that there are plenty of circumstances where I would personally be fine killing someone myself. But that does not extend to my representative state government. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any circumstance where a person who's in custody and neutralized should then be executed. If it's a war, that's one thing. If it's a shooter somewhere in public, that's something. But if they've already got somebody in custody and then they're going to get together and plot his murder, I don't think the state should have that power. And I don't think I should have that power. If I was ever in a position where I had reason to kill someone, it should be investigated, and I should be charged if it wasn't justified. So, yeah. And I don't think it's ever justified for the state to do it.
What about body cams? That seems like a no-brainer to me. Like, yeah, have body cams, but you mentioned...
Yeah, I've heard some people say that there's a fear that with body cams, police will be less involved with policing. They'll just avoid more situations, or they'll fail to act when they should because of fear of prosecution. And that may be the case, but I still think it's better to get things on the record. I mean, if it's hard for people to adjust, you know, that's all right. It has to happen. Mm-hmm. It's as time progresses, there's always adjustment periods and problems, kinks that need to be worked out. But the way things are going, whether it's from the perspective of police brutality or the perspective of people thinking there's police brutality, either way, it seems like both would be helped by seeing what they're actually doing, instead of speculating based on what they said happened versus what somebody else said happened, versus a 4-second cell phone video that had half the frame in the picture. You know, I don't personally see much of a downside for body cams.
Yeah, me neither. I guess I can kind of see how it would have, like you said, like sort of a Ferguson effect where cops would be maybe want to get less involved. But I think that, cops are just as tribal as anyone else, and they are more inclined to protect their own and lie in scenarios where
Sure.
it's,
Yeah, and I mean the amount of
cops.
trust and sensitivity that we put in that position, there should be oversight and accountability. Because there are lots of cops who abuse their power.
Yeah.
Or who just mess up because of training or whatever, and in either case that could be corrected by identifying it with cams. So,
Man, this gun issue is such a paradox in my mind lately, because I am like more pro-gun than I've ever been in my life. Like I used to be kind of just neutral, but leaning towards I don't really like guns. And I think that came from a place of feeling safe in the world. And
so naive.
yes, and now that I feel less safe, I am all for guns. And so much so that I have kind of this like weird like I have this like feeling of like heroic awe whenever I see the quote unquote good guy with a gun. Like for instance, there were some shop owners protecting their shops in Minneapolis when the riots first started that were just heavily armed. And I was like, fuck yeah. I learned about rooftop Koreans, which I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm all for people, protecting themselves. But it's like ironic because, like I said, we would have less fatalities if there were less guns. So it's like the problem is guns and the solution is more guns.
Yeah, I mean, I think the solution is increased regulation. So I also have a bit of a nuanced perspective on guns. I own them, and I think I would have no problem. I would prefer more vetting and oversight of my ownership of guns. Some kind of licensing process, some kind of maybe a regular test about things like gun laws, gun safety, gun operation. Something to catch more cases where people's guns should be taken from them.
Yeah.
Without trying to just take all the guns, because that just, first of all, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And secondly, if it did work, then you would have a short and midterm problem of all the guns out there belonging to bad guys who weren't on record and got them from the black market or something. And that would be a problem, especially given how many guns there are already in America. But if instead we take a measured approach and don't just start taking guns or banning guns, but instead increase regulations on gun owners and gun sales, then that would, in itself, that would do a lot to remove guns from some of the more dangerous people. And then gradually it would reduce, hopefully it would remove enough guns from the circulation that it would be less controversial and simpler to, well, no, I was going to say to eventually ban firearms, but yeah, I'm not sure that is the right way to go with policies. But, that's kind of my point, is that there is nuance at the other end of the tunnel. But at this end of it, I think, just like anything else that's dangerous, like a car or a prescription pad, there should be some oversight. There should be regulation.
Yeah.
And that would go a long way.
Yeah.
It wouldn't solve the problem, but it's practical and reasonable, and it would help a lot, I think.
Yeah. It's such a tricky situation, and like it bugs me how people will oversimplify it. We're not really talking about guns right now with police brutality, even though I think that's a key variable going on right now. Like we have more guns than people. That automatically makes interactions between police and civilians more risky, and is automatically going to mean we're going to have more deaths. And I was sort of having this conversation, and someone was like, yeah, we should get rid of all the guns. You're right. And it's like, well, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but like such a tricky thing to detangle in this country, because we are not only is there so many guns, but like we have like this fetish for guns too. Like we have this weird obsession that's unlike any other country, with the Second Amendment. And people take for granted that the toothpaste is out of the tube. And that's not to say there aren't, you just mentioned plenty of like things we could do to regulate it, but we're still going to have things like school shootings once in a while, and
Yeah.
gun violence, and we
Yeah.
have to, I'm not saying we should, just accept that and not think that we can do better, but we shouldn't be surprised when these things happen, because this is the nature of our country, and this these are the things that are out there.
Yeah, and generally speaking, the way societies get better is gradual, and it's frustrating, and it does mean that there's a lot of unjust suffering and death in the meantime, and that's a fact of life. And the reason we have representative democracy is so that we can adjust things as time goes on. And simple ideas like just banning all guns, I don't disagree in principle, but I'm a pragmatist, and unless somebody tells me exactly how that's going to work, it's not a viable plan.
Right. And in times like this, gun sales are going up a lot.
Yeah.
And they go up a lot every school shooting as well.
Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic was even declared a pandemic, I was in line buying a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, just seeing that there was a widespread disease, and I'm a pretty liberal person, and politically I'm very liberal, and I'm fairly measured, I think, in my logic. But when I saw widespread disease and businesses shutting down, the first thing I thought was personal safety. So, I think as time is progressing over the last few months, it's proving a not unreasonable reaction, given the rioting that we're seeing, the general unrest, and the lack of insight into what exactly is going to happen next. There's a lot to be concerned about.
Yeah. I'm really worried about these patriot groups going after Chaz here in the future.
Yeah, the Seattle Autonomous Zone. Yeah, you mentioned several thousand people ostensibly are going.
Yeah, it's a Facebook group, and it says over 1,000 people are going. I really doubt if it happens, it's going to be that many. There's already some videos coming out showing, relatively well-known Proud Boys. I saw one video of a group of Proud Boys destroying this guy's phone, and it was kind of a brawl in the streets. So it looks like they're around, but I don't know how crazy it's going to get. But it was interesting to hear some of my lefty friends talk about it, because it's they're patriot groups, so they're gonna be armed, and then it's like this anarchist zone is like, well, shit, I guess we should have guns too, because it's not gonna be a fair fight if only one side has guns. And so it's interesting how a group of people who would otherwise probably be anti-gun is like, well, shit, now we need guns.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there are also, to be fair, I saw a friend of mine make a point on Facebook today that, there are also liberals with guns. They just aren't as likely to march around in public with them like toy soldiers, showing them off. And I think that's true as well. There are a lot of liberals who already have guns, like me. I mean, I've been a gun owner for, I think, 11 years or so. And but there's also a lot of liberals who are acquiring guns for the first time right now.
Yeah.
Because they are recognizing threats. And in theory, it's great to get rid of guns, but in reality, you got to get through the week,
Yeah.
Not that you need a gun to get through the week, but
maybe this week.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. That's the thing, is we don't know on a week-to-week basis. It's hard to say what exactly is going to happen.
Yeah.
And my concern from the beginning has been the resilience of critical infrastructure systems. And I have not seen great reasons to assuage my fears about the performance of these systems in a pandemic or in anything else, such as the economic downturn it's resulted in, the mass unemployment, the emotional distress the population is in, the increase in cyber attacks, both domestically and internationally. I hear there's a bad hurricane season coming that's already taxing on infrastructure. So, I mean, I'm still concerned that if we see either frequent or prolonged breakdowns of basic utilities and other things like supply chains, that is when all bets are off.
Yeah.
If that happens, I'm probably boarding up some windows.
Yeah. Oh.
When do we get to eat the cats? Is that like right away or no? We have to wait. Okay.
No, they eat us.
Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't eat our cats just to survive. I'd rather starve to death. I think I'd have to. Well, because I mean, I guess if I starve to death, then they will too. Well, maybe just open the doors and then starve to death.
Okay.
So they can go catch mice. Kimiko will definitely do well on that front. I wonder if Hypatia would start feeding Kimiko if we were dead.
How would she feed her?
Just bring her rats and stuff.
I think Hypatia would just run off and be like, "You're on your own."
Yeah, I like to believe that they would become friends. She'd start taking care of her.
Wow, this is alienating our audience, talking about two
they
cats.
Know all about our cats. They just saw one of them.
Do you want to do a Am I the Asshole?
Yeah, we got 5 minutes left, so let's do that.
So this was a Am I the Asshole that I got wrong. I said something and I got kind of dogpiled. And I actually kind of agreed with the dogpile after
you're
a while.
right, I am an asshole. Yeah.
But I'm going to read it to you and see what you think.
All right.
All right. Hey everyone, I am 19 years old and my parents are in their 50s. For as long as I can remember, I have been allergic to several things: dairy, wheat, flour, gluten, legumes. Since I was a child, my parents have completely kept them out of our house. While other kids ate breakfast cereals, I ate fish and assorted pickled vegetables for breakfast.
Fuck.
While other kids had Lunchables, I had grilled chicken or fish with, again, assorted vegetables, usually sweet potatoes. While other kids ate birthday cake, I ate an apple. I never questioned this until a couple months ago. I was at my aunt's house for my birthday party, and she made brownies for everyone. For me, she took great steps to make them with almond flour and avoided all my allergies. I started eating them and thought little of it until my aunt suddenly looked at me and panicked. In a panicked way, asked which plate I took the brownies from. I pointed from one where I got my brownies, and she immediately stood up and told me I had to get my EpiPen. She raced to ask my mother for it, and I sat there scared out of my mind because I had never mistakenly eaten flour before. I noticed my mother had calmed her down, and then she said that we don't have to worry because she had switched the plates of brownies, and after all, I had eaten the ones made of almond flour. I found this incredibly odd because, really, why would she swap the plates? That doesn't even make sense. But for the time being, I let the issue rest. It didn't sit well for me for about a week, and finally I went to get an allergy test, and the doctor started with a skin prick test, and lo and behold, I didn't react to any of the above substances. Then he ordered a blood test, and when the results came in, they said that I had absolutely no intolerance of any of the foods I was supposedly allergic to. I was furious and called my mother. She eventually admitted she had lied to me because she wanted me to be on a Paleolithic diet and wanted me to be able to avoid the temptations. She raised me with a lie about her own health, but she keeps insisting that I try to see it from her perspective. She spams my phone with messages about how healthy I am, that I never once had acne, that I've been in great shape my whole life, and that I have strong teeth and bones, and even that I have a D1. I got onto a D1 college tennis team. She started calling me ungrateful for her intervention and insisting I really should be glad that I never got carb addicted. I don't really know what to think. I carried around an EpiPen for all these years, one I suspected to be fake, seeing as my mother never got me to replace it, and I don't even know anymore. Am I the asshole and ungrateful son for losing it over this? And I forgot to read the title. The title is, Am I the asshole going no contact with my parents after learning they lied to me about my allergies my whole life? So what do you think?
I think that the parent is the asshole, and I think that this person should gradually chill out and reestablish contact. But I think that he justifiably has little reason to trust his... Was it just his one parent?
He just mentioned his mom, it sounds... No, well, he said his parents.
Yeah.
But then the story is kind of more about his mom.
Yeah, so I mean... that's a striking manipulation, and I think he has every reason to be upset. And after a while, nonetheless, he should try to build a bridge.
So that's basically what I said, but I put it this way. I said, that's pretty weird. That's pretty weird, and they shouldn't have lied, but not talking to them ever again is a huge overreaction. And then I said that he was the asshole for that overreaction.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing. It's just being this dichotomy of like, it's either this one's the asshole or that one's the asshole. Like, we've run up against this before where well, there was an instigating asshole, but then the other one overreacted. And
Right.
I would say, depending on how long it's been, it's not yet an overreaction unless it's been like 5 years and they haven't talked to him,
So I got really ratioed over this, and a lot of people were telling me that this was abusive, this was fucked up, and I was excusing an abuser. And at first I was like kind of defensive a bit. I thought like, wow, these people are kind of overreacting. But a point that they made that I didn't consider, and this person didn't really communicate in his story, was that this lie potentially made this person live in fear of death his whole life. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't really consider that. So yeah, maybe you're the asshole wasn't the right conclusion. But I still stand behind, I think this is potentially a forgivable offense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we mostly agree.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it's not forgivable, like the whole concept of forgiveness often escapes me. I don't necessarily understand exactly what it even is supposed to signify. I think because it's almost like forgiveness is like saying, you know what, I've adjusted my values to account for your bullshit, and now it's fine what you did. And that's nonsense, of course. I think for me, rather than forgiveness, there's a certain amount of tolerance that is reasonable in some circumstances, usually with your family. There's a certain bond, I think, that should be protected there, despite your family doing things that you would not tolerate from other people. But on the other hand, it's not like this person can ever trust their parents again.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. And people were comparing this behavior, like what the mom did, as being like Munchausen by proxy, which I thought was ridiculous because Munchausen by proxy is when a caretaker intentionally poisons the person they're taking care of so that they're sick and they can get sympathy. This was supposedly the parent trying to get the kid to be healthier. Right. I don't think it was the right thing to do, but the intention was, was positive.
Right. And even if there is, maybe there's a case to be made that like it could be that this is somewhat more sinister. Like it could be a psychiatric defect in the parent that maybe like the attention and sympathy of having a kid with allergies in a way is connected to Munchausen by proxy. But yeah, I think Munchausen by proxy, like you said, is cases of deliberate poisoning and causing disease. Right. And that's not the case here.
Yeah. So when I read this, I thought the worst offense was that he couldn't eat birthday cake, which I was like, well, that's not that sucks, but it's not like a horrible abuse. Like you need to cut off all ties with your parents.
Yeah, it's just
to the credit of people who ratioed me, which a lot of them started digging through my tweets and calling me transphobic and shit like that. But they did make the point that I didn't consider, that I was like, okay, yeah, maybe her intention was good, but she used the fear of death to do it, which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah, and I would also say that it's actually not the outcome that's the key factor here. It's the situation. It's the lie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is what makes it bad. But I think it makes the lie less bad, considering the intention of it.
Yeah, the intention, sure, and the outcome. If we were to just like wave a wand and there's no fear of death, and we set that issue aside, the other outcome primarily it sounds like is excellent health, and that's great. Yeah, but not at the expense of honesty and individual agency.
I agree.
Because if I was a parent, I would definitely go out of my way to make sure my kid ate a lot like that, but it's not by tricking them. Yeah. I don't know how I'd do it. I'm sure it would be fucking hard, but I just would never cross that line.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
All right.
Thanks everybody for listening, and please send us your listener questions at standardpodcast.com/contact.
Thanks guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye.